At 4 p.m. and I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we don't have anyone here to do roll call.
Charles Blacklights.
Sorry about that, Janet.
Charles Blacklands.
Here.
Kevin Boyles.
Here.
Tom Hageland.
Here.
Ruth Nelson.
Here.
Jana Shogren.
Here.
Sarah Spear.
Here.
All present.
Great. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And this is a special school board meeting, and it is being recorded, and access to the recording will be made later on the district's website after all interviews are completed. We have the agenda here, and do I have an approval of the agenda as presented?
So move. Second.
First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Hagelin. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we do not have any public input at this meeting.
Introduce Ron Wagner. Ron?
Aye. Aye.
Just set my stuff down here. I think you're comfortable with the shaking of the hand? Nice to meet you. Pleasure meeting you.
Sir, Kevin Boyles. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Ron on top.
Nice to meet you.
Nelson, nice to meet
Pleasure.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Charles.
meet you.
Hi, Ron and Jenna. Nice to meet you. So how were the roads? They were okay?
They were wet, so they were
Yeah.
fine, so yeah.
Okay, good. Hope they stay that way for us.
Yes, let's hope so.
Well, welcome, and thank you for making the trip up here. I'm going to start off with the first question, then we'll go around the table. Okay.
Absolutely.
And in a few minutes, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, work history, interests, professional achievements, and how this has prepared you to be the next superintendent of Brainerd Public Schools.
And thank you. I want to thank you for this time. Before I step in, I just want to recognize and honor the land in which I sit in today with the Dakota land and the Ojibwe and the Anishinaabe people. So I just want to honor that as I step into this opportunity and say how privileged I am and humbled to be here. Currently, as an associate superintendent, I serve 22 schools in Minneapolis Public Schools. And going back and starting with my roots, and my roots are growing up as a brother and a son in Indiana. My mom instilled in me in family and community, and those values continue to sit deep in my core and who I am. I believe family and community needs to be prevalent in all the work we do, and it's a student-centered focus. You know, teaching in Indiana for 13 years, I had the opportunity to relocate back to Minnesota. My wife's from Minnesota, so my mother-in-law had a lot of influence, so we moved back to Minnesota. And I had the opportunity to get a teaching job at middle school, teaching mathematics on a Monday before school was to begin on that following Monday, and it was in North Minneapolis. And that was truly transformational on who I am as a leader and as a person. So within that, teaching mathematics, I really grew knowing my own identity, knowing who I am as a leader, as a teacher, and also worked with a middle school transformation and the new middle school platform and transformed the middle school in a new direction, which was on evidence-based learning, and became assistant principal at Olson Middle School. And then was promoted to a principalship position. I was a 7th principal in 10 years. And the turnover really impacted the community as well as the staff and the students. We saw a huge exodus of students, really focusing on inclusion, equity, and really valuing the staff and inspiring the staff. We were able to build back the school, in which it was a pre-K through 8th grade school. I was promoted principal, and I committed to 5 years of leading that school on the first day and said, this is my commitment. We saw a huge influx and re-enrollment of students, increased enrollment by 40%, led the district in growth for 2 years. We had a lot of new to the country students. At that time, East African immigrant students, Somali students, as well as a co-location of American Indian Magnet in the building. So from there, after the 5 years, I moved into an associate superintendent role, which I'm currently in now, serving a wide array of schools from socioeconomic diversity to racial isolated schools to schools that are very limited students eligible for application and benefits, as well as very small amount of diversity in schools. So there's a wide array of schools. I serve Minneapolis, and Minneapolis, unfortunately, is a segregated city. So I'm afforded the privilege of serving schools across the district.
Excellent. Thank you, Ron, and welcome.
Thank you.
Our next question is if you could describe your leadership and management style, how you go about making decisions, resolving conflicts, and if you could just provide an example or two with that, with your leadership style.
So I'll use the African proverb of, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. I believe in collaboration, shared leadership, inspiring others to ensure that we move forward as one. Going alone, being a manager or a boss, it's very easy to tell someone what to do, but inspiring others to follow and inspiring others to be their very best is absolutely important. Thinking of kind of that collective efficacy and getting everyone to move forward in the same direction as a principal, and really flipping the script to the exclusionary model to an inclusion model. It was really about bringing and centering our focus on our students, on our why. And it was centering student voice, centering community voice, caregiver voice, and teacher voice. And I needed to ensure that we were all in the same place and we were empowered to move forward as one. So when you think of really the leadership style, it is collaborative, shared leadership as really focusing on relationships and trust. To move to an inclusion model really took a lot of trust building and relationship building and really providing the why. The staff were very hesitant, but I needed to provide them the supports as teachers to understand the culture of our students, the understanding of the language and the academic supports for our students that are coming with EL services, as well as the students receiving special education services. I needed to build capacity and depth of knowledge in the staff to really keep them, help them be confident and competent in supporting the students. So the leadership style is collaborative. It's a shared leadership. It's about relationships and trust. And the example would be the time as a building principal to really bringing back the center and keeping the students at the center of our why and leading with purpose.
Welcome again, Ron. Next question for you. How do you work with staff, community members, other public institutions, the community, and the private sector? I know that's a lot. To enhance trust between all parties. Can you give us an example of an initiative that worked in building trust and partnership?
So building trust is one conversation at a time. And, trust is absolutely important in really building on relationships. Absent relationships, absent trust, it's very challenging to move any type of opportunity forward or a shared vision because not all voices are heard. If you think of parent engagement, community engagement, oftentimes it's information sharing versus empowerment. And we have to get to where the voices of our community are centered. One area that thinking is working with a target corporation, and as I'll go back to being as a principal, we really wanted to ensure we provided the support for all students and thinking through the whole child and family. So I worked with partnership of Target as well as caring and sharing hands. It's kind of a food service or a food shelf that we offered on a monthly basis, where we had Target volunteers come in as through to support a food shelf and really supported our families. And working with the Target Corporation, I needed to share what our why was, what our purpose, and it was supporting not only for our students, but our families at that time. So Target chose to work in partnership with us, as well as bringing in our community leaders, many of our chiefs from the Somali community, to really talk about these are the needs of the community, how can we better support. So it is about one conversation at a time. It is about empowering our families, meeting our families where they are, and ensuring that we're looking at the whole child as we move forward and keeping students at the center. So building that trust is about that one conversation at a time and ensuring that we keep the voices centered from our community.
Hi, Ron. Welcome. Next question for you is if you could please describe for us your financial expertise and background and maybe give a few examples of your success in that area.
So when I believe this is one I'd like to take some time. I read through the stakeholder input and I heard a lot about the financial commitment, stability, and visioning, and this is absolutely important. As a math teacher, we know that is very important. But we know that financial stability and stewardship is important in all districts. And when we think of a child-centered focus as a school district, we know it is essential to have the opportunity for each student to ensure we get families back. The only way to increase revenue, 3 ways. You can increase enrollment, which is about the offerings, which you'll hear through that student-centered answers that I'm hoping to provide tonight. It's about reducing costs and efficiencies, and that's cuts, and that's also that could be very challenging, or it's asking the community. Thinking back more globally, I think that it's, as a district, and if you look at your policies around the budget development, it's important that that's presented a balanced budget to you as the board. We know that the legislature right now is split. Being present as a superintendent down at the legislature to ensure our legislative agenda around fiscal stability will be important. If you think of the general aid formula right now, keeping up with inflation, thinking of Brainerd Public Schools right now, if they were to keep up with inflation, it would be another $800 and some dollars per student that Brainerd would be getting, $5.6 million per year if the general aid funding was keeping up with inflation. It has not. Over the past 20 years, it's been about a 1.5 average, which is challenging. So being part of the legislature is absolutely essential as a superintendent to continue to move our agenda forward. Also, the cross-subsidy of special education, that is challenging. Currently in Minneapolis, we're cross-subsidizing special education for $55 million. It is a value that we provide our supports, our students receiving special education supports, as well as students receiving English language supports. That's another cross-subsidy of about $14 million in Minneapolis. Currently, the federal government has stated 40% that they would fund. About 8% is what they're giving the state. So not only at the federal level for the funding of special education, but also at the state level. So we need to ensure that school districts are fully funded based on need. In my role as a principal I worked with, we do a lot of per basic or per pupil funding at our schools. I had close to a $10 million budget that I managed to ensure that I monitored the budget versus the actuals to align the budget to the values. As a district, we need to ensure our budget is aligned to our values, keeping the students at the center. If cuts are to be made, we need to keep it away from students. To increase revenue, we need to bring students back. That's threading in the marketing. That's providing high-quality opportunities for our students. That organizational coherence needs to be present. If we're to go to a community, we need to be transparent. We need to be able to articulate what is our why. What is our why and how are the dollars being aligned? It is, our constituents, our families, our caregivers work way too hard for their dollars. They need to, to be able to commit, they need to understand what they're committing to. As an associate superintendent, I support a $660 million budget in Minneapolis. So we work collectively to ensure that we take the pro forma, which is based on our projections, to ensure that it is aligned to our values and present a balanced board in supporting the superintendent. Currently, we just came out on the other end of a very difficult and challenging time, not only with COVID, but with a strike. So going back to relationships and trust, our parents are very concerned right now, losing approximately, we don't know how many students, but that's going to impact our budget moving forward, even into the next fiscal year. So we're going to have to relook at our budget and start thinking differently as we have new commitments to our teacher and our bargaining units, but also our commitment to keep cuts away from our students. So there's a lot of involvement that I have with budgeting, and I think that is essential to have organizational coherence and align your budgets to your values and have your key priorities fully funded, and then being able to monitor your return on investment. Because our constituents, our caregivers, our families need to understand and fully know how is the money being spent and what is that transparency. Because again, they work very hard for their dollars. We can't take for granted that this too will move forward because we're continuing to keep the status quo.
Thanks, Ron. What are the key components of a successful curriculum and instruction program in a district, and how do you get all grade levels and schools involved so the curriculum is aligned?
So thinking of curriculum, great question. And, keep being a teacher at the core. I think it's important to think, what are the needs of our students? And I think even it's not all student, it's each student. So, all is bringing many in, but we need to think of each student. And the curriculum is a tool. So as a teacher, how am I using the tool to meet the needs of each individual student? And we know our standards are kind of where we want to go to. How do we backward map and using different tools? But also the curriculum as a tool, we need to have the coherence. We need to be able to monitor what tools are having an impact on student achievement. So thinking of curriculum development, there needs to be that alignment. But as a teacher, I need to have the innovative creativity to ensure that I'm using my pedagogy and my skills to impact the student's personalized learning. So each student should have what is that individualized learning going to look like? How am I utilizing the tool to meet the standards, and how do I know it's having an impact? It's the students bring their very best selves to school each and every day. How do I, as a teacher, know that I need to monitor my impact, monitor my instruction? What do I need to change and do differently to impact Ron today that I may not have done different yesterday? So I think it's empowering our teachers to also use a tool that we need to measure the impact, because it's a huge investment as we think about coherence and investing in curriculum. We can't just have some arbitrary everyone doing something different, because it's hard to going back to that fiscal management, that return on investment. How do we know it's having an impact for our student and their experience? And also, when you think of curriculum, students' identity needs to be represented in the curriculum. How do the students see themselves in the curriculum? How is their identity represented? So it's through an equity, that educational equity lens. How do we ensure that each student is having the opportunity to move forward with the curriculum as a tool? And how do we know that the students are moving forward, and how do we monitor the progress of our students?
All right, next question. How do you define excellence in your administrative team? What expectations do you have of them? How do you mentor them, and how do you evaluate them?
Wonderful question, Director Lance. And I say it starts with me as a leader. And I need to model excellence. I need to model what I expect. And it's, when we think of leadership, leadership goes back to inspiring someone to be their very best. I should not be the smartest person in a group of individuals or in a meeting. I should be then knowing that I take the expertise of others to continue to move our general focus and our vision forward. Thinking of the work that I currently do in serving 22 principals, I believe in talent development. You take the high school principal currently who started out here in Brainerd as a dean, moved through an assistant principal, and is now a principal. That development, that pipeline work is absolutely important to me as a leader. In 2014, we started some Wallace Foundation work, which is Wallace is out of New York City. It's about Principal Supervisor Initiative, where as a principal supervisor, and it's working with superintendents, associate superintendents, it's about building capacity and instructional leadership in our principals. So it's about development of our building leaders and developing a principal pipeline. That initiative has sunset. I'm currently now sponsoring and working with Wallace Foundation with the Principal Pipeline Initiative. So that's taking the work of the principal development to a deeper level. So we need to ensure that we're developing that pipeline and inspiring and lifting up others to be their very best. As a building principal, I had, we call them paraprofessionals, educational assistants, to ensure what is your scope as you're stepping in as a part of our community? How can I support you on your short-term and long-term goals? There were many support staff that are now teachers in our district. And many of them are staff of color. So it's really seeing staff for who they are, ensuring that we have the invisible that's visible, not only in students, but in staff. And then how am I lifting up and inspiring others to be their very best? So currently, doing the work with the Wallace Foundation, it is building capacity in the building principals I serve, which are 22. That's larger than the scope of when I first started the initiative of 11 initially under the principal supervisor work. But it's about meeting each individual where they are, ensuring that they are their very best. And there's a set of standards in which I evaluate our principals on currently. Those standards are that were created in Minneapolis. But there are national standards as we continue to do the pipeline work that threads in equity. So how do we ensure that we have equity-centered leadership in the work we're doing? And that's some equity, that's some standards redevelopment that we're doing in collaboration with the Wallace Foundation. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So we're almost halfway through with your questions, just so you're doing great, so.
Is the time moving? I just want to make sure that I'm good on time, so,
Yeah,
okay.
You're doing great. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So my question is, what are the significant challenges that schools need to consider as they plan for the future? As you've studied our district in particular, what unique challenges do you see that we face that may be different from other districts?
So unique challenges, and it's a lot of it is the unknown, and the unknown of coming back from COVID, and how do we ensure that students who are finding success during distance learning, during the hybrid models, how do we build on that? How do we continue to think about and build out tomorrow for our students, and think through the 21st century skills and being innovative? It's, celebrating and recognizing, reflecting, those are key elements. So we reflect on yesterday, celebrate today, anticipate tomorrow. So what is it that we don't know? How do we center youth voice? Our parents have seen our classrooms through the learning, the distance, like they've never seen before. How do we build on that, hear from our caregivers and our families to really co-construct what tomorrow will look like? Many challenges that we face right now, our teachers are asked to do more with less. There's teacher burnout. There's a lot that we're asking our staff to do. I think we need to think about that, and it can't be the initiative overload. We need to go back to the question, what is curriculum, what tools, how are we supporting our teachers? According to research, our teachers are the #1 lever for student achievement. How are we lifting up our teachers and inspiring our teachers to lean in and know that, my words, they're out of gas. And it is challenging. My own son is a teacher right now, and listening to him, it is very challenging. And he's 3 years in. Teacher turnover, leadership turnover, it's a challenge nationally right now. So, and then when you think of enrollment, our families have been very cautious right now of coming back, and we need to build back better as a collective. Challenges as we think of Brainerd, as I study Brainerd, it is about enrollment. And that's going back to the fiscal stability and really marketing and really building on academic excellence. Principal Larson, Superintendent Larson, huge shoes to fill. And know that it's not about tearing down, it's about accelerating excellence. It's about enhancing opportunities for our students and our families and really centering the voice of our youth. And building for tomorrow is something that we don't know. We don't know what, as we think of birth to adult, that should be our vision. How do we develop a birth to adult plan knowing that our students entering in kindergarten right now We do not know we do not know what the workforce will be like when they graduate. We have to continue to think about tomorrow, think differently, integrate technology differently, and be prepared. I know as a district, we were not prepared for distance learning. We did not have a learning management system. We did not have the one-on-one. Brainerd, I think, was better set up for success to be able to pivot. But how do we know? We don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. So we need to ensure that we are preparing our students for tomorrow, really thinking differently and about that personalized learning for each student. There were some that excelled during that time of distance, and we need to build upon that. We need to hear from our parents and keep students at the center as we build forward. So the challenge is, Brainerd's definitely the fiscal sustainability, knowing that the ESSER funds will go away. So how are we continue to think about tomorrow around our financial supports here in Brainerd?
Good. Ron, can you describe a project or experience that would demonstrate your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
My hope is I've been able to thread some of that through, and I'll use going and I'll tie in a budget conversation, and this is a great question that, as an associate superintendent, I was able to not only leverage title, but, my male privilege in a situation to ensure that equity was funneled through in our budget allocation. And what we had at the time when we did the per pupil and the allocation out to schools, we were funding schools for our students that receive English language supports. We were funding schools at 73% of a FTE, full-time equivalent, or a position. We were expecting schools then to use their compensatory dollars to fund the other 27%. If a school had a high enrollment of students that needed EL services, as well as generated title and compensatory, the dollars that were generated had to supplement the EL or the funding. You have a school that had the same title percentage, title fund and compensatory or poverty percentage, they were able to use their compensatory and title to support each student based on a need. So quite honestly, what we were doing, we were then penalizing schools that had a high enrollment of students with free and reduced as well as EL services. So what I was able to do, push the cabinet on, and is to break this down and lead through an equity lens to ensure that equality existed first, and then how do we build in an equity lens? And there were schools that had a high concentration of EL as well as the title and a high concentration of poverty. So we were able to move 100% funding of FTEs for our English language teachers. So what that did, it provided an equity model to support our students and our schools who needed the additional resources to support our students, freed up the compensatory to not only provide on top of the EL service, but those academic supports the students or the extrinsic, or the peripheral supports the students may need.
If you were offered this position here in Brainerd, what are the three main things that you would do when you assume the superintendent position?
So if that I had the opportunity to come back to have a conversation to go deeper into who I am as a leader and as a person, I would present a 100-day plan that would isolate some of those, but I believe, there's the listening, learning, and leading, but I'm also a believer in bridging, connecting, and unifying, and stepping in as if the next superintendent, there's a lot of healing that needs to take place with our community and our staff, and then unifying and to build unifying, and the 516 square miles that make up Brainerd is really working collaboratively with the city to have a strong city, strong community focus. Mayor Bordeaux and the school system need to be in one accord as we move forward. How are we supporting the whole child? And the areas of focus would be continuing to build on a strong multi-tiered systems of support, a strong social-emotional learning, really thinking about the whole child. It would also be about equity. You know, I was excited in why Brainerd. I was excited to see that the June declaration to the community and the letter to the community in 2020 about your declaration around equity. I believe that that is a reason why. And everyone has an on-ramp to equity. So how do we continue those conversations? And knowing that as a white man, I've walked in the shoes of my equity journey. So it would be multi-tiered systems of support. It would be the social-emotional learning, the healing, and equity, and really keeping equity and students at the center of what we do. And then there would be the fiscal management and the stewardship would be 4, but I see that threaded through all 3. But there needs to be a coherence, and going back to Superintendent Larson, the acceleration and enhancement and building a better tomorrow with and hearing from our constituents and our youth, and making sure our youth and our students were at the table to co-construct what that would look like.
Could you please share your experience running, operating, and/or bond referendums? And what did you learn, and how successful were you at passing them?
And I know that this has come up in the stakeholder, thank you, Director, several times, and that goes back to, you know, the 3 ways of raising revenue. You know, in Minneapolis, we were able to, I was part of 2 referendums that passed overwhelmingly, as well as a tech levy. And what we were able to do was to lead with our why and to really show this is how it's impacting the students and being very transparent. And that's going, you know, and that has been built on trust and going out and reaching out and listening to our community. You know, I know we went through a recent district redesign and shifting school boundaries. We did a lot of information sharing and not necessarily on the end of the IEP continuum of engagement where we truly empower. So it is about empowering, and I believe when we had the opportunity to pass our levy in a referendum, it was about the empowerment. The district in which I currently live in, the district took for granted as a taxpayer that this referendum, this levy will pass because it always has. And they kind of presented the same reason why, the same information sharing, and the community on a non-election year showed up at 93% and say, no, we cannot continue to do the same and get the same outcomes. You need to be more transparent. Where are the dollars? How are the dollars aligned to the work we're doing? How's it impacting the student and staff experience? So the opportunity I've had is both as a taxpayer as well as being an associate superintendent and a teacher in a district that's passed 2 referendums and a recent tech levy in which we didn't have at the time to free up some of our general ed education or Fund 1 dollars. So it's been part of a cabinet, part of the marketing team, and part of the outreach team in my role as associate superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Moving along, what do standardized test scores tell us and not tell us about a school district, and how would you address the achievement gap among groups in our district?
Another great question. So standardized tests. So when I think of student-centered, standardized tests tell us where a student is in a moment in time. And it is based on the standards, which are our expectation from the state of Minnesota that we teach. And we know that standards potentially have bias, or the standardized tests. We know that standardized tests can't be the end. When I think of standardized tests, you know, we cannot plan and hope and use a standardized test and we should have done things differently. When I think of each student and how we personalize the learning, it should be about the growth of each student and how we know they're making progress. And when we get to a standardized test, we should be able to know how a student's going to perform in relation to the standards in which we're expected to get the students to. So currently through school improvement work, we do And through a lot of our data cycles, we use a FastBridge as a screener. We then use, on students that are high risk, we use a diagnostic. And through the multi-tier systems of support, we're really ensure that we have a strong tier 1, 24% of special education here in Brainerd. And if you think of the cross-subsidy, we need to have a strong core. We cannot plan and hope that our students do well on a standardized test. And as a principal, as a teacher, and associate superintendent, it's important to continue to monitor the growth of our students. How do we ensure that students are making the growth necessary? If they're well below the standard or well below grade level, when we think of the opportunity gap, it takes 2 years of high growth to ensure that the students get to where they need to be. So through educational equity, it is about ensuring that we close the gap between the low achieving, the high achieving, and removing the disparity or the predictability of race, income, gender on standardized tests. So we need to do better to support each student through a personalized plan on how do we get them how do we monitor the growth of a student, and how are we providing the supports that a student needs to make the progress necessary to close the gap. You know, Minnesota has a glaring gap. Minneapolis has a gap that we've worked to close for many years. As associate superintendent, I work with the principals, coach the principals to segregate the data based on each student. You know, the data is a number, but it's not about the number. Each student is represented. How do we look at each student to ensure we're providing the very best opportunity and have those high expectations and support the student to meet those high expectations? A standard is an expectation that we get the students to and move beyond. What supports do we need to provide? And then strengthening that tier 2 and tier 3 to ensure that we are providing the supports for our students. Schools that we've closed the opportunity gap have been schools that I've supported, and we've been supporting the principal to move off of the comprehensive support and improvement list to move into more of the targeted. I had 3 schools that moved off the list into the targeted, and then through a progress monitoring pre-COVID, I had schools that were organized for success that were making the growth come winter, that were moving in the trajectory. 5 of those schools were moving in the right direction, but then COVID came along and we don't have that baseline or that benchmark. However, that has not stopped the work. We continue to personalize the learning. We continue to monitor the growth of our student and to support our students differently as we continue to move forward.
Thank you.
How do you communicate with staff, students, and the public in your current position? What different strategies do you use? Share an example of how you use technology in your communication.
So this is, thank you, Director Lance. It's, communication is important that in all roles. And if we, continue to build that trust and relationship with our families and our students, it's about me showing up as my authentic self. And, as an associate superintendent, I don't lead with title, I lead with heart. And leading with heart is important to be able to, through cultural humility, to step into and engage with parents and being who I am. Oftentimes we listen to others, but we don't authentically hear their stories, their perspective, their point of views, their beliefs, what they believe and what they value, I think, and their truth is important. As I step in and I need to meet parents where they are. Serving schools across Minneapolis, I need to understand what my identity as a male, as a white male with privilege, how when I step in with cultural humility, how my identity impacts those in which I step in with. Regardless of the situation, regardless of class, of sex, I need to understand how my identity is then impacts or potentially contributes to being a barrier to a conversation or an engagement opportunity. One example was going through the district redesign. I had many of our Somali families were in full support of a K-8, pre-K-8 model. They believe in that family. They have large families, and they wanted their families and their students in one building. So I went out, and what we were doing were information sharing nights, and we called them engagement sessions. We didn't really get to the engagement because there was not that reciprocal two-way feedback, which that's why it was not truly that empowerment, that engagement. So what I did, I went out to meet communities, and specifically the Somali community. We sat in a circle. We met at 10 o'clock, which met their needs, which was after the time they drove their students to school. That was a time, where we had coffee. We had an opportunity to sit in a circle and for me to authentically hear their values as a community. And I was able to take their values and their perspective, because what we were finding during these engagement sessions with the community, it was not fully representative of our full community in Minneapolis. We need to ensure that we kept all voices, and all voices were present, and we were hearing the multiple perspectives as we built a structure and redesigned our district boundaries based on the needs of our students. And that was developed through an equity model, so we needed to ensure access, and the community's voice was centered in all of our conversations.
Thank you. Ron, tell us what you have learned in doing your homework about the Brainerd schools, and if selected, how you would use that information in your entry plan. So the homework is, and I will go back to, I'll start with the stakeholder feedback, and which is amazing to read. And if you think of specifically the certified staff and the student voice and feedback, a lot of that is who I am, which I'll fold in here in a minute. But what I've learned about Brainerd schools, and going back to the question, why Brainerd? Brainerd is centered in my values of family and community, and I've learned that even from your mission statement here at Brainerd School, when it talks and it leads with partnering with the community. That is absolutely essential, so we can make sure that students are being able to be their personal best. How do we support that and live out that mission? And one thing that I read is, there was a lot, and as a superintendent and as a board and as leaders, we can't be everything to everybody, but we need to be something to somebody. And as a superintendent, that is that one conversation at a time. That is out being present, being a champion, and being unapologetic for keeping what's best for our students and our staff and our community at the core of what we do. What I've learned about Brainerd is the commitment and the value to the alignment to my values of community and family. And I've seen that through the many opportunities of water skiing on the lakes up here to the, coaching baseball in the Brainerd area fields. But it is that commitment to the students and the commitment of staff and talking and coming in through and listening to the wonderful reception that I received downstairs, just talking about the history and hearing from one of the employees and hearing her story of how she moved back to and how her grandmother went to the old high school. That history and that deep commitment to family and community, again, aligns to my value. And when doing the research of Brainerd, that commitment, that deep value, is why I'm sitting here today with the opportunity of seeking to serve Brainerd area schools. So that's the homework I've done, and it's the stakeholder, again, piece is about, of who we are, who Brainerd School is. And I'm just going to say I lead with humility, and I find that humility oftentimes compresses competence and confidence. I don't want to lead necessarily with arrogance and confidence, but I want to know that I do, I want to ensure that my skills and my experience are present in these conversations, that the humility does not suppress any of the lack of confidence and competence to meet the needs of Brainerd schools.
Good, very nice. Well, Ron, we're at the last question. Like you, we've been blessed with a number of great applicants. So the last question, and you've touched on this a lot already, but the last question is, why should we hire you as our next superintendent, and why do you want to work in the Brainerd School District?
And this is a great booking question, and I appreciate just, building on what I've hopefully threaded through. Students are at the center of and should be at the center of all we do. It's who I am, and students continue to remain core. I'm a big believer that, every student deserves to have a high-quality instruction and a teacher that cares and loves them. At Brainerd School, when I go to read to Miss O'Grady's kindergarten classroom at I think it's Riverside Elementary, it shouldn't be, oh, we have a guest. It should be, hey, Ron's here, Mr. Wagner is here, again, to read to our class. It's, Brainerd is an opportunity to, at the size of Brainerd, to be part of a community, to be part of a family in which, my words, I can wrap my arms around to get to know the families, the caregivers, the staff, the students. That is important. When I think about, Minneapolis Public Schools, I'm not running away. The work is not done and finished in Minneapolis Public Schools. I'm a believer in continuing to meet the needs of the students I have not met yet. What I don't have, I'm not part of a community. I serve 22 schools, and Minneapolis is a district of schools. Here in Brainerd area, it's communities that feed up to the warrior, and I believe the stakeholders said to bleed blue. And I have read in my it's BHS. I was Blackfoot High School, but it's BHS. You have the Brainerd High School, so we were red, and then the person will call it purple, but it is bleeding that blue, and it is that pride and keeping students at the center. And I think it's an opportunity to serve and continue to build and accelerate the excellence that exists. I'm not coming here to be a change agent. I'm coming here to keep students' voice at the center and keeping our family and caregivers' voice and centering the voice and the work we do and co-construct a vision that will meet the needs of our students that we don't know about yet. I think Brainerd Schools offers that opportunity at close to 7,000 students. It is the right size, the right values, the right opportunity for me to continue a leadership journey that I believe is about fit. You as a board, this is an absolutely important decision that you make on behalf of the community you represent. And it is about a value alignment and about fit. And my hope is that my skills and my experience and who I am as a person is about that fit. I will continue to lead with who I am. Walking around Walmart 2 hours ago here in Brainerd, that is who I am. I want to be in a ball cap in Brainerd to say, hey, I know you. How is your son doing at Riverside Elementary? So engaging in those conversations, sitting down and having an authentic conversation over a cup of coffee is absolutely important to me. So to be able to serve Brainerd would be an honor, would be a privilege. It's definitely large shoes to fill. That was in the feedback as well as Superintendent Larson. But to work collaboratively with the board, with the communities, to build back a better in partnership with the area Brainerd, with the mayor, with the different communities, with building back the 516 square miles to be one. And that is, we need to be one vision as we continue to move forward. And it's, the school should be and continue to be the heartbeat of the community. So that is my belief, and that is why Brainerd area schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a little bit of time here. Do you have any questions for us?
I do, thank you. And I have a deeper question if afforded the opportunity to move forward. But at this point, I'll stay at a higher level. And I know that, Brainerd is beautiful, and it's, I've come here, with my family, with my wife. My daughter lives in Hibbing. My son teaches in the city. So it's a beautiful, beautiful place that we've often visited, just kind of that, to meet in the middle, if you will. But as residents of the area, what are you most proud of the community itself, of being a community member? And I've already experienced Walmart. It's beautiful. I love it. So if we could build on the Walmart.
Have you been to Fleet Farm?
I I've been here since 2003, and the one thing that I've really appreciated about Brainerd along the way is it has really struggled, Brainerd Baxter, to get better at who they are. And a lot of different things, but overall, that's something I've really appreciated since I've been here.
Thank you.
And I came here, I don't know, it's 30 years now, when my oldest son was 5 months old. And one of the reasons we came here is, well, a couple of reasons, but one was the reason that we knew what a great school district this was. So what drew me here were the schools, and that was way before I was involved in schools at all. And then my husband's a fisherman, and so he got to work for a fishing company, so it was,
Nice.
yeah. But, I mean, and there's lots of, love the recreational opportunities around here too, so.
Agreed.
And I even like the winters, except for they're a little too long.
Yes, exactly. Today's an example, right? Welcome to April.
Yeah.
You know, just a comment. I was born and raised here and had an opportunity to really have raise my family and my career here. And what I like about this community, you mentioned the size. So for me, it's real fitting. It has everything that I need, but yet it's that sense of community. I do like being able to go to a restaurant and not know anybody, and I'd like to go sometimes and know some folks. So for me, it's kind of that right size, and I like the calculated growth. Probably more so on the west side of where it's grown. So to me, it's a nice fit. That size is a nice blend, I think, for us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Do you want me to jump in? You're looking at me. So I work in my day job with families who struggle with a number of challenges, which is not a fun thing to hold up per se, but from my lens, I get to see this is a very caring community. We really rise up and help people. And so whether it's through our schools or our local nonprofits, and just people caring for and helping one another in general, I see loud and clear every day.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
And for me, I grew up in suburban Brainerd, better known as rural Pillager.
Good to know.
Yeah, way out the burbs.
Okay.
In fact, the next time we build a stadium, we're thinking about putting one out there.
There you go. Of course.
What I would say is when I've lived all over the country, and 3 years ago I was living in suburban Chicago, real suburban Chicago. And my son was entering high school, my last child, who has some definitive special needs, special education needs. And it was a no-brainer to come back home here to this community, to this school system, because I have infinite trust in this system, having never been intricately involved in it until a year and a half ago when I joined this group. So that's number one. And number two would be maybe something that maybe none of us were able to learn until we went through what we've gone through over the last year and change, specifically, right? Which is we spend a lot of time listening to voices. I think that's important.
Yes.
I would submit that a lot of the voices that we've heard are the loudest voices and sometimes not an accurate representation of the broader voice within the community. And what I think, despite what we see on these cameras and in these meetings, what I found really interesting that the public doesn't get to see are the emails and the communications and the, hey, how are you in the store, and all those different things that the broader community has really stepped up in support of the community, in support of our teachers, educators, administrators, school staff, bus drivers, and specifically this body as well. So I would say that in the back of my mind, I might have not given Brainerd credit for that level of fortitude. So that was really eye-opening for me since I joined the board.
Thank you.
And I guess I would piggyback on that. I think there's a real sense of community pride and investment in the schools. I think we're very, very proud of what our schools have to offer, and I think the whole community feels that. Just with the eagerness to partner with businesses and with the chamber, they're always, how can we help and how can we support? That's the feeling I get in this community.
Thank you. So I appreciate it. And I heard pride, I heard the recreation, just the opportunity to continue to enjoy what the area has to offer. You know, I heard, supporting individual needs of students, and just the during these interesting times, to know that the community's voices, that are not always present or may not be present. They are present in other ways that continue to support Brainerd. You know, I heard just about the investment of the community and thinking about the whole child and thinking about the needs of our families. The vastness of Brainerd, but ensure that there's the pride in the suburb or the urban or whatever the different areas, and just to really think about the experience. And I think that those are some important, the family and the community is absolutely essential. And I appreciate you hearing that pride and for you able to hopefully that gives you chills and brings you back to, you know, why you sit where you sit and those who you represent. And know that, you know, if given the chance, I'd love to partner with the community and to serve the board and serve the community in a way that moves the vision, the mission forward in an authentic way. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You very much.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you. You still have your number one, right?
What's that?
You still have your number one.
I have my number one.
Poor thing. You feel okay?
Yeah, I saw you this morning. You were fine.
So far.
It's gotten worse throughout the day, huh?
You know, one
All
real
those Jeremy high schoolers.
All the
thing,
yelling.
Kevin, with the signs is the first few times when I ran, I'd get most of my signs back. Like people, or I'd find them. But when I won this time, I couldn't find like half of them.
Well, they're souvenirs now. I saw them on eBay for like 14 bucks.
That's like, did they go up in somebody's garage? I don't know. But they're expensive.
One of those 18 Blackland signs. Those things are worth like $22.
I don't know now. 200, 150, whatever the.
And they don't go very far. I mean,
No,
it's a big district.
Yeah,
You need a lot
I
of
don't even know if there's
signs.
that many, whatever the
How many
order
did you
was. Whatever.
Probably have to go look at my financial disclosures. I don't remember.
I can't remember.
I think 300,
I don't know, I don't know how detailed it was.
but I got kind of
I lose some after
suckered.
every time I ran, so it was a good thing I got on when I did. Because I was getting less and less signs.
The reality is I had probably like 20 left over that we never did put up though, just because we started to really get focused on major thoroughfares. And then I got some of those like plywood size ones, like 8x4s.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
How many signs did you have?
I had stickers or buttons.
But the
I still
year,
got some. Want one?
one year I ran,
They're only
was
like $4.
when Brainerd, I don't know if you remember, they
$5.50.
came through and they took all the political signs down. They didn't tell anybody, they just, like, everybody, just clear out the whole city. Fortunately, some person told me that mine were all in the garbage behind City Hall.
Hello,
So
I'd
I
like
picked
to
them up.
introduce you to Dr. Frank Herman, who is the principal at Robbinsdale Cooper High School.
There, Sarah, nice to meet you.
Kevin? Nice to meet you, sir.
Right? Good to meet you. I'm Tom.
Charles.
Hi Frank, I'm Jana. It's nice to meet you.
And it's snowing harder out there, isn't it? Or maybe it's stopped now, but.
Yes, I was hoping I parked close to the snow emergency route, so hopefully, I didn't know where to park for sure.
Well, probably wasn't snowing when you left.
No.
Robbinsdale, huh? Okay. Well, welcome. I'm going to start out and then we'll go around the table asking questions. So,
Very good.
my question is just to have you tell us a little bit about yourself, because it's not even a question. Share your education and work history, interests, and professional achievements, and tell us how those have prepared you for the position to be superintendent of Brainerd Public Schools.
Very good. Well, thank you again for inviting me here tonight. I really appreciate it. I started out in a small farming community in the southwest corner of the state of Minnesota, and then I started attending college at Bemidji State University, so it was quite a travel through the times when Old 71 was just a 2-lane all the way. So it took some time to travel and also experience the different geographical areas of the state that I had not experienced growing up. So went there and finished my bachelor's degree at Bemidji State University. And then I went to the metro area and started teaching at an alternative learning center as a social studies and English teacher at the time. At the same time, I also was a dean of students at a middle school in St. Louis Park for a number of those years. And it was one of those opportunities where I loved being the dean, but I also loved being in the classroom, so I didn't want to give up all those pieces as of yet. And during that time, I also started a family. I have 4 children. My last one is graduating this year. She's a senior, and so she's going off after that. And so that presents an opportunity as well that I'll get into a little bit later. I completed my master's at Hamlin University, and also my K through 12 principal license through Mankato State, as well as my doctorate program at St. Cloud. So as you can see, I covered a lot of geographical areas for post-secondary institutions as well around the state. And during that time, the opportunities with me was I was a dean of students at a middle school, and then a dean of students 9 through 12 at Springley Park High School. And I was also a director of the Alternative Learning Center in Springley Park At that time, we started there with about 66 students when I first started there. And 5 years later, when I left, we had well over 150 students attending our alternative learning programming to better accommodate students that needed a different learning environment. From there, I was the principal of Spring Lake Park High School for 5 years. And during that time, my kid's mother passed away, and family has always been important and the number one piece, and that's where my attention needed to be directed to my 4 children. And principal is a very intensive job, which I enjoy. I like to go all in any position that I have. However, like I said, family is first. From there, so I accepted an assistant principal job at Robbinsdale Cooper High School, and just turned out to be an incredible experience there. And I was assistant principal there for 2 years at the high school. And then 1 year I had the opportunity to work as kind of a special assigned assistant principal at the Alternative Learning Center and Career and College Readiness Programming. And I did that for a year, and then I was hired back as the head principal at Cooper High School in Robbinsdale, and I've been there for, this is my 7th year as the head principal, and we continue to work with our community of learners and our community around there, and that's where I'm currently at. And as I said, my youngest is graduating from high school. She also elected on her own to open enroll at Cooper High School, which I was a bit leery because I didn't know if she wanted to attend where I would be the principal, as I would be obviously keeping a close eye on her. But she's done an amazing job, and so now it does present an opportunity for me to possibly look at options and where the next step is, where I'd like to go. I have a place not too far from here where my fiance currently lives. We bought about 2 years ago, and so we're looking at options for what next steps are, and that's why this also presents an opportunity for that.
Great, thank you. And welcome, Frank. Thank you for joining us. The next question is if you could describe your leadership style and how you gather input, make decisions, how you handle with conflict resolution, and maybe provide an example or two.
For sure. The one thing that I like to focus on really when I look at my leadership style is really around transparency, integrity, and collaboration. And that those terms will probably spiral through some of my answers because it's kind of in my core as far as how I lead and how I work with leadership teams and working through that. For example, when I started at Cooper, I redesigned the leadership teams with that in mind, to expand the opportunities for teacher leaders and staff leaders to become part of that process, because I don't believe in working in silos or working separately. We need to, it's kind of a team effort. And so redesigning our teams and defining what those roles would be was very essential for me starting out and elevating that to a kind of a different trajectory of where we were currently at. And I will say it took a bit of a struggle at first because it wasn't a practice of, sometimes it was cursory as far as, let me see how you feel, what do you want to do about this, and action planning. But in creating the teams that I did and kind of following those 3 pieces of transparency, integrity, and collaboration, it soon became very apparent that really was a model that how we designed our instructional leadership team, how we created our department chairs, and how we worked together and kind of braid our conversations together as we work towards ensuring that our students are getting the best quality programming that we can within Cooper.
Good. Well, again, welcome, Frank. Your next question is, how do you work with staff, community members, other public institutions, the community and private sector to enhance trust between all parties? That's a lot of parties. Give us an example of an initiative that worked in building trust and partnership across constituencies.
Okay, great. So kind of going back to building that transparency piece and that trust with staff was really ensuring that when we look at an issue or we have a concern, that it's very transparent of what our roles are, but also what is the undetermined goal, so to speak. So if there's an end determined where I would like to end up, I'm very honest and being upfront is this is where we need to be, and what is our job is to define how we're going to get there. For example, when I was at Spring Lake Park, we looked at an advisory program, and that was not at first was not received very well, starting an advisory program at the high school. And again, it was working with students and our staff in looking at advisory type programming. And to be honest, I was very transparent in saying we will have an advisory program. What I don't know is what structure, what it will look like. So working together, we were able to develop a very effective program within that, knowing that I'm trusting that we're going to be able to work together. And you know what kind of the end determined piece is going to be. So let's work together to figure out all the pieces in there. And from that kind of springboard, that trust piece, because then they knew like, well, we really are working together and you really value our input and how we work with that. In kind of the same manner as working with our community piece. For example, I was recently, last year, charged with starting out the discussions around middle school redesign in our district. And so part of that was, what is that going to look like and how are we going to start that? We have four middle schools. And so setting up that process first of working with groups of students, working with groups of staff and teachers from the schools, and working with parents and community members, and kind of setting up what those are defined by, what our objectives are, and also what process we're going to take as we start these discussions. And so leading that, because obviously people are very passionate about and they want the best for their children. And the students also have a voice in that, and they're very passionate about what they want, and staff as well. So it's really kind of bringing those conversations together to talk about, what's our current reality, what are our strengths, what are our things we should probably work on, and where do we think we need to go with that. And so my job was to kind of start those initial pieces and then hand that off to the next level of conversation with that. And so in doing that, I was able to work on a district level piece around the middle school discussions for that.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Frank. Welcome. Could you describe your financial expertise and background for us, please, and then maybe give some examples of your success in this area?
Sure. Starting in and really starting to be exposed to some of the financial pieces was working at the Alternative Learning Center when I was brought into that to look at the district piece. The superintendent at the time was very clear that we will not be subsidizing any alternative programming, and it was, still in its early stages as far as really what alternative had meant and the feel for that. And so it was very clear that I needed to have a good understanding of finances and how the revenue streams flowed into and out of a particular program or a building in order for that to be successful and to ensure that it was strong and sustainable for our kids that come there to receive really quality programming. And so that was my first foray into programming, both looking at general ed, special ed funding pieces, and how they braided together to provide that educational programming for our kids. At that time, I was also a part of district teams around. We went through a fairly severe budget reduction process due to cutbacks and so forth. And so I was part of that district level process and teams around facilitating those discussions with community around, here are priorities, what should we be looking at, how can we support programming, and what is working, what isn't, and what kind of funding is available. Kind of my core is really looking at as we need to be financial and good stewards of our taxpayer money. It's not our school money. And so with that lens, I think I've been able to bring to the table some good conversations around that fiscal responsibility and ensuring that we're tight with here's our, at that time, the district strategic plan, and how does that crosswalk to student programming? And then if that really is a priority within the district, how can we financially support that with the limited resources that we have and work within that? Currently in Robbinsdale, we've also went through some pretty severe budget reductions of close to $10 million within the last several years. And I've been a part of those district level teams as well as discussing, again, prioritizing what that may look like, and looking at all the funding streams, looking at what's coming in and what's going out, and as well as prioritizing the objectives of the district and where we want to go with that. And so those have been my experience on the district level with that. In the building level, we have, this past 2 years, we've been given the autonomous responsibility of, here's your full building budget. And instead of, before we were kind of given a budget and we had to stay within those different pockets within that. And so they opened that up and really said, here's your, like, for example, $11 million, and here's the % of staffing, here's the % of capital. And that really presented a unique experience for me in being able to work with our leadership teams and bringing in those conversations to look at, here's our budget on a smaller scale, and what is our school priorities and our instructional plan and our school improvement plan, and how do we support that and able to shift the resources in order to support that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What are the key components of a successful curriculum and instruction program in a district, and how do you get all grade levels and schools involved so the curriculum is aligned?
What was the lesson? The curriculum what?
Is aligned.
Oh, is aligned. Very good. One of the pieces that I've been fortunate of, when I started at Cooper High School, I was able to create an instructional framework that did not exist before within our building. And that really went to the, again, my core of saying, you know, every child, every day in every classroom, what is the experience that they're having? And we want it to be, you know, the optimal piece. And in order to do that, we need to have an instructional program that aligns with what that would look like. From that experience, that expanded out to myself working on a district level curriculum instructional team. And with that, we were able to look at our continuum that we have, you know, pre-K through 12th grade at that point, but now we've also included our AB programming as we look at that continuum piece. And so to ensure that alignment is so that when students are matriculate from, you know, through different levels, that continuum is as smooth as possible as they transition from piece to piece. And so part of that is being able to work on that curriculum instructional team to look at that instructional framework and as well as our curriculum cycles, and go through that and be a part of that process.
Thank you.
Next question. How do you define excellence in your administrative team? What expectations do you have of them? How do you mentor them? And how do you evaluate them?
Very good. The first piece is really revolves around, and that's not just admin teams, but with others, is that vulnerability. We have to be able to open up ourselves to be a little bit vulnerable in order for us to feel safe to take risks and have a safe place to do that. And so when I work with administrative team, I'm able to not only show that, but ensure that we have that transparency and trust between our team members. At Cooper, I have 3 assistant principals, and we all have different strengths that we bring to the table, thank goodness, and that's how we balance each other out. I'm also a principal learning leader within the district, so I lead both district, I'm part of a district administrative team that meets regularly, as well as the leader of the high school cohort team in working on those pieces. And again, it's projecting out really that place of open and honest discussion and a safe place to be able to do that. And that's really comes back to allowing each to have their voice at the table and ensuring that's an authentic piece for that. And so it comes to that. When it comes to an evaluative piece, our district has a system set up, and they have core competencies that we evaluate each year. And so for me, around working with the evaluative piece is looking at how you're going to, what evidence do you have to support that we're working in these core competencies, whether it's cultural competency, instructional competency, communication competency, for example. What's the data look like, and can we have a deep discussion around that? And the great thing about having those conversations around data is we know that data without children are just numbers. So we have to have, and children without data, we're not going to move the needle that we need to. So it's really embedding, like, well, who are the faces behind that data and having those discussions really allows us to have both that qualitative and quantitative discussion around both what do we expect from our teams, and then how do we hold ourselves accountable to each other, and because what you permit, you promote. And so that allows for us to kind of check each other when we have those discussions and when we're in meetings. And again, we have a very vocal team because we've created that space for us and with us, because that conflict that we often have, that healthy conflict, is going to help us grow and become stronger. And so I do feel that that's a part of having a community and being part of a family within a district to be able to have those and have those spaces for that.
What are the significant challenges that schools need to consider as they plan for the future? As you have studied our district, what unique challenges do we face that may be different from other districts?
Sure. I think some unique challenge is how we continue to make ourselves relevant to what is changing around us. 2 years ago, my hair was pitch black, and now it's got this, I call it a new color, it's pandemic gray. And so it's really has opened up the conversations around how do we keep ourselves relevant with what's going around us, but also our learners are coming back. And what did that mean? And what does that look like? And that's really been an exciting opportunity for us to take a look at, whether it's instructional, whether it's curriculum, whether it's how do we invent new spaces, whether it's virtual, online, and that's really the challenge that we face all the time, is how do we keep ourselves relevant? How do we prepare students for careers that we are not sure exist yet? How do we prepare them for that? And one of the pieces was in looking at, through the brain information, for example, that opportunity, innovation, and success. And that's really that vulnerability piece. Like, we want to make sure when students walk across that stage that they're ready to take on, whether they're going to college, whether they're going in the military, whether they're going into the workforce, that they're going to be ready for that community engagement, regardless of what that might look like. And so those changes are going to be the challenge for us to consistently reevaluate and reinvent what we do, how we do it, and how we work with the resources within our community. And I think, I was very excited to read, some of the partnerships that we have here, like with Central Lakes Community College and those pieces. And, we're just starting to delve into that. And you guys are far ahead here with those opportunities, provide those opportunities for our kids here. And so that's an exciting piece for that. So those are the challenges and the opportunities kind of balled into one that, we've had before, but I think they've been kind of spotlighted these last couple of years. They're really, what is the priority pieces? What do we need to focus in on? What do students really need to be able to do and to know when they walk across and get that diploma, and what's that going to set them up for? And that's our opportunity to have those conversations and plan and reset ourselves and constantly reevaluate that to get us ready for that.
Good, thank you. Frank, can you describe a project or an experience that would demonstrate your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Sure. One of the projects that we worked on, and it was a huge shift for our school, was really to take a look at how do we provide the academic, social, and emotional needs of our students. Years ago, that really wasn't a focus for our piece. And our students makeup at Cooper were about 80% students of color. And so we know that, talk about reinventing yourself and understanding that it's more than just the academic piece that we need to focus in on. What's that whole child, and what would that look like? And if we know that, and if we know that our vulnerable populations are coming in, whether they're students of color or socioeconomic or special needs, how are we going to address that, and how are we going to look at that within our system and build that in? At the time, we really didn't have much in place, and so working with those teams, we created a place during the day, and it's exciting to know that it's kind of very similar to what's built into the high school here now already. But for us, it was a huge shift, and it really involved a lot of community discussion and a lot of pushback at first from several of our parent groups in taking time out of some of our academic day to provide that opportunity for that social-emotional catch-up or support that we built in right into the day, because most of our students, we could offer after school, but many of our students work, and that income that they was part of their family income. So we knew that we were missing a huge population for that. So again, we had to build it into the day. And so when we work on some of those pieces and looking at what did students need, then it really opened up an opportunity for us to listen to student voices if we're really trying to address that part of it. So we created this space during the day, every day, for about 30 minutes or an hour, depending on the day. And it provided that space for us to address some of those pieces for that. And that was, like I said, a shift for our school to be able to do that, and bringing in the parents and students to help that shift was essential for that.
If you were offered this position, what are the 3 things that you would do when you assume the superintendent role?
I call it the 3 L's, look, listen, and learn. And there's a great opportunity in each one of those as we do that. And it's braiding in together of, coming into a community where we need to be able to look what's out there, what's going on, and to listen to all pieces of stakeholders within that, and just absorb that and take that in as far as, having those conversations and listening to what our stakeholders have, whether it's our students, our parents, our community members, business folks. It's just being able to connect and listen to all of those, and then to learn. And by that learning piece, we're going to look at what are we doing really well, and what are some things we want to take a look at and do better at, what things do we want to keep, and maybe what things do we want to set aside. And those are all pieces that I think are essential. One, starting for me, is be able to kind of focus in on those the 3 L's for me.
Next question. Could you share your experience with operating or bond referendum? What did you learn, and how successful were you in passing them?
Sure. I've been involved at the district level with 2 different pieces in 2 different districts. And the one piece in Springley Park was a referendum to remodel and bringing in quite a revision of our buildings. For example, I was at the high school at the time and leading community groups and meeting them where they're at as far as having those discussions of what a referendum would look like. When you start, talking about how we're going to utilize taxpayer money, people get very passionate, as they should, because they want to make sure that we're being responsible in how we're going to utilize that money. So we set up several community meetings where I'd go either into the homes or into a community center close by to walk through what the bond referendum we're looking at, what are the objectives of it, and what it would benefits come out of that. And one of the pieces in there, we did do a full high school $45 million remodel, which took a number of years, and that added to part of my gray, I suppose. But it was a wonderful experience, but it really allowed me the opportunity, firsthand experience, to go out in the community and talk about what that referendum would mean, and all aspects of it as far as costs and how we would expend it, and what we would come out with, and what are the assets, what we'd be looking at when we're done. And a very similar experience with in Robbinsdale for a referendum there as well, being part of that initial team and just having that discussion of why we're doing this, what it's about, where we're at, our current reality, and where we need to be. Being able to be able to answer questions from the community was very important to ensure that I have knowledge of that, as well as doing the soldier work within that as far as phone calling and meetings, and those pieces all came, all come with that, because we want to ensure that what we're doing was the right thing. And once we establish that, then we want to make sure that's going to be followed through with, and that being up front and being a model and being a part of that was very important.
Thank you. What do standardized test scores tell us and not tell us about a school district? And how would you address the achievement gap among groups in our district?
Very good. I think, as I said before, the data piece is what we look at when we're looking at standardized test scores, without looking at the students and coming in. So the standardized test can really be a benchmark test of where students are at and where they're coming from. Obviously, if it's based, connected crosswalk to our standards, that would be an indicator of how do we unpack that data and what does it look like. For example, if you might have a really good year, for example, and your test scores go up, there's lots of celebration in that, and that's a good piece. However, why did they go up? And oftentimes we forget, like, we don't want to be lucky by chance. We want to be intentional in our success with our students. So standardized tests for me is only one piece of a larger puzzle for that. We can sort of look at the standardized tests and how that works with our standards, how we're connecting to it. But what are the other pieces with that? As I kind of alluded to earlier, data without students are just some numbers. And we want to make sure we add faces behind that data. Standardized tests are a measurement, whether we support that or not. That is a piece of our current reality, and we need to look at that. And that is a discussion that we have in the broader picture. I'll bring it to, for example, when we look at our standardized test data, how does that look in the continuum of curriculum and instruction, and what does that mean, and how are we honing in on that? And what was the second part to that question, I believe? How
would you address the achievement gap among groups in our district?
Yep. And looking at some of the data here, obviously, and I think that was not an anomaly with Brainerd, seeing a drop right during or before or right after the pandemic piece came in with that, and I think we're still trying to understand the effect of everything on our children and what does that mean, and how do we work that, because it's often that push and pull of, we hope that our curriculum is aligned so that standardized tests at the end is really it should really just be a follow-through with what has been happening in the classroom anyway. And so it's kind of like a great game. You practice, and the game is kind of the end of it. And so it shouldn't be a separate set-aside thing embedded into what we do. And so that standardized piece, we have to think of it very similar to that, is unpacking that data. What story is it telling us? And then looking through ensuring that we have that discussion on that continuum of K-12, how are students more articulating, what does that story tell the students moving into the next level based on those scores. That's a piece of it. And what else are we going to put together to create that picture of that student coming through, whether it's a standardized test for this or whether it's a quantitative test for that. Those pieces all have to be talked about together and not isolated and separate.
How do you communicate with staff, students, and the public in your current position? What different strategies do you use? Share an example of how you use technology in your communication.
Sure. What I currently do is I communicate weekly with families, with a newsletter that goes out through email. It's called the Cooper Connections. And I also communicate with students weekly by very similar newsletter format. And I also communicate with staff weekly. So I do 3 separate communications that go out every week to staff. And so one of the things that I unapologetically do is I highlight and promote our school, as much as I can. We have incredible things happening. And so sometimes people need to hear that, and we don't hear it enough. And we have some great students and great staff. And so part of that communication is evolving that, but it's also what's happening. And oftentimes most parents, I get emails that this is just every week they get communication, and I often am told that that's very thorough and they really appreciate those communication pieces. Along with that, I do have a principal account for Twitter that started out years ago with students, but us old folks have taken that over. And so mostly it's parents on that, which is another form of communication with that. I do have an Instagram principal account that's mostly students. And so we communicate through that way. And I try to update those things, like especially for the student one, I'll take random pictures, because it's very important to me to be at almost every event that I can every night. It seems like, especially now that my kids are older, I don't have to be home as much. But you know what, I'm at a really good place there where I still want to be at those events. It's not like I have to be as a principal. I really want to be, because to see the kids grow over the 4 years is just absolutely amazing. And so they love seeing themselves in pictures. As you know, the selfies things, right? So they love seeing themselves in action, whether it's on stage or in the pool or in a concert or on the court. So I make sure I blast those out to let them know that we're watching and we're proud of them. And so I have not delved into TikTok because I'm not a dancer very well, so I'll leave that still to the younger crew. But there's a piece on that. So part of the technology piece is not only those social media sites, I also post for announcements. I'll often do videos, and they're not the highest quality videos as far as acting is concerned. And sometimes I do that on purpose, and because students will come up and say, that was a really bad video, and then that right there is an opportunity for discussion, to get to know that. So like, well, what did you think about it? And well, I thought it was this. And well, don't be quite that honest, but that provides me an opportunity to get to know that student a little bit, because 1,700 students, a lot of students. So how am I going to know them? So I can meet them there for that. So that's kind of a fun way with that, which can lead into other avenues. Then when I'm starting to talk to that student, and so as you can see with the newsletters, and we also obviously have a Facebook page, but along with that communication piece, there are probably about once or twice a month I do like to send phone messages out, just to let them know this is Principal Herman, this is so they hear the voice and kind of connect that with the school. For our feeder middle schools, I start sending a newsletter out at the beginning of 8th grade, because for some, this is probably their first child coming to school, so they're nervous. They want to have a really good transition to high school, and they want to know who's there and who's going to be taking their kids in. And so when they walk through that door, that's kind of my parental thing. I'm going to be there for your kid, and I want you to know who I am and what we're doing. And so I sent out probably a quarterly newsletter to our 8th grade family, just let them know what's going on at Cooper. We're really excited to have you here next year as a future Hawk kind of thing, and that also allows me to also get to know some of the parents so that they can transition to high school. And so that's really I love doing those kind of things. So those are kind of my highlights for communication.
Great, thanks. Tell us what you've learned in doing your homework about Brainerd schools, and if selected, how would you use this information for your entry plan?
Yeah, so one of the great things, again, is coming down to that opportunities that, and reading about the pieces from the website and that students have access to, for example, the partnerships with Central Lakes Community College, the AP offerings, providing those opportunities at the high school level, but also the fine arts programming that seems to be embedded into this community is pretty amazing. And also in being a part of the community for even before that we had the place here, I was connected to the community and seeing, just the kind of the partnerships with businesses and how kids go into the workforce. And so just reading those pieces is very exciting to be able to do what I want to do to add value to the community and growing some of those pieces with that. And along with that, in looking at the demographics and seeing some of the shifts that may be happening around, how do we ensure we're going to be inclusive for all students, and defining what does equity mean for us. And I know that work has already started, and reading up on some of that, and even within the the mission piece of, ensuring that all students are ready for that global citizenship, so to speak. And so that's an exciting piece that really got my attention for this. And part of that is saying that it presents a challenge and opportunity all at the same time.
Well, good. Well, Frank, we're down to the last question. And on this, you've touched a little bit, but really what we'd like to know is why we should hire you as our next superintendent and why you want to work in the Brainerd Public Schools.
Sure. One of the things that I like to talk about is where I'm currently at. I love what I do and the work that I do. And so that affords me the opportunity to be very selective of where I think I can be a good fit for a school district and where I can add value to it. So that allows me to be a little bit more selective and ensure that when I read through the vision statement and the district priorities and how it was just hit, like they just dinged everyone I read was just like, this is pretty amazing. Because I don't sense that in some of the openings and positions that are out there. So I can be somewhat strategic in that part of it for me, and coming in, being able to have the experiences that I've had both on the building and district level, run instruction and finance pieces, and with those experiences, I believe allows me to be able to have fresh view and coming in as a superintendent of Brainerd and being able to have those pieces in place. One, that they match up with my core value piece and what I want to do as a community member and how I want to be ingrained in the community. This is a community that I will be a part of either way, to be honest with you. And so I'd love to, be a part of that and starting out like this and be embedded in what happens in the community and being out and visible with everybody here. And ultimately it comes down to, there's going to be conflict and ideas happening, but I know from sensing that we all want our kids to go through a system that is going to value them, and that when they're done, that they're going to be ready for whatever place and pathway they want to take. And I want to be a part of that, and I can be a part of that, and I can add to those pieces with that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. So we have a little bit of time left, so do you have any questions for us?
I do have a question. In what ways would you or does the board support the superintendent to help kind of maintain and grow the relationship between us as we work together?
I think we've always had, of all of us, I've been on the board the longest. I'm the oldest also, so Tom's a little bit after me. And anyway, I think we've always had really good board superintendent relationships in this district. And I think the board you have here right now is excellent, and we listen to what the superintendent thinks is right, but we also have our own opinions, and we work well together. The vice chair and the chair meet fairly regularly with the superintendent. The chair is probably the person the superintendent works with closest, but the superintendent usually also invites other board members in or calls them and keeps them up to date, does a weekly newsletter, and we all feel comfortable calling her or him at any time. So I think it's always been I think we're blessed in this area to have good, strong board members, and we've had good, strong superintendents. So I don't know if anyone.
This is my 13th year on the board, and as Bruce said, we've just always have had really good relationships with not only the board and each other, but with superintendent and administration. There's just been that open transparency, great communication, good dialogue. So it would be odd if there wasn't anything but that. And I think part of in the support of the superintendent is that we don't get involved with micromanaging. Certainly, we're going to get our phone calls and our emails from parents and community members. But we're really looking for the superintendent to take the lead on that, and we'll provide policy, we'll provide the guidance and on the big things, big decisions that'll come to the board. So we want to be very transparent, but very supportive of leadership.
Very good. Thank you for answering that. That's really the only question I had at this time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again for inviting me here tonight, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Hopefully, good wet roads on the way home.
Yeah, not frozen.
Well, the puddles in my driveway are just incredible. We had a new driveway
My pleasure.
Game time.
My pleasure to introduce someone who needs no introduction. Dr. Heidi Hahn, Assistant Superintendent in Brainerd Public Schools. So, Heidi Hahn.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Hunt.
Nice to meet you, Director Bliss.
Hi, I'm Tom.
Nice to meet you.
Right, Nelson, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Charles.
Hey, good to see you.
And I don't even have to ask you how the roads were.
I'm really ready for spring.
Yes, we
I think
all
as we all are.
Yeah, so welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to follow the same exact questions, and some might sound a little funny because you already work here, but other than that, we'll
I'll do my,
follow.
I'll do my best to give the correct answer then.
Okay. So first, just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe something you don't think we know, and share your education, work history, interests, professional achievements, and tell us how they have prepared you for this position.
Well, absolutely. So I feel like I've been on a 26-year interview process with all of you. So I've been here for 26 years and I've loved every minute, most days, outside of a pandemic, I'll be honest. But I actually grew up in the Twin Cities, and I've always had a strong love and connection to the Brainerd Lakes area because I'm one of those fortunate people that had grandparents that chose to settle up here. And so I grew up coming to the lake and being able to have those experiences. Paul Bunyan land still has a huge fondness in my heart. But I went to Concordia Academy High School, so I've actually been through the parochial private system. But I had a volleyball scholarship that took me out to Bozeman, Montana. So I went to Montana State University on a volleyball scholarship, and I finished my bachelor's degree in child development and family science, and then pursued a master's degree in education, health, and human development. Took a job out there doing some child protection and service work there, and became very, very homesick and was ready to get home. So started interviewing in the Twin Cities, and after being in Bozeman, Montana, Twin Cities seemed really large. So I had the grand idea that I'd start to look and settle back up in the Brainerd Lakes area. So I was fortunate, spent a short stint at the Confidence Learning Center, knowing that my anticipation, I really wanted to get into the school system. And I started in Brainerd Public Schools as a mental health professional. As a matter of fact, I started my Brainerd career in the basement of this building and spent time there, and then opened a program over at the Franklin Junior High, so moved over there. While I was there, I thought it would be a great idea to get a school counseling license. So I went back to school and did additional master's work to get a school counseling license and spent time there. And then I met some wonderful people who just really said, Heidi, you should become a special education teacher and really work with our emotional behavior students. So I went back to school again and finished my special education licensure. Did one short stint in an elementary school, Lincoln Elementary. God bless our elementary staff. I was definitely meant to be with junior high and high school students. And so continued my career at Brainerd High School and then over at the Alternative Learning Center. While doing that, I went back to school again and finished my administrative licensures in K-12 principal and director of special education. And from there, went on to become the assistant director of special education with the Paul Bunyan Education Cooperative, and then became the director of special education. I was very intentional when I finished my admin degrees. I did not add my superintendent's license. That was not on my bucket list of things to accomplish. But went back and added that, as well as finishing my doctorate degree in education administration, and actually became very frustrated with the turnover that was happening with our superintendent positions and our assistant superintendent positions. And I loved my job as the director of special ed, but really felt a calling that I wanted to be supportive. I love Brainerd. I love what we do here. And so that was what moved me to the assistant superintendent role. And now, again, I feel prepared and called for to be interviewing for this position. Accomplishments, I think my greatest accomplishment or honor that I've received since I've been here is being identified and named Educator of the Year. It's very humbling when your colleagues and the people you work alongside and walk alongside with every day decide to nominate you for that honor. It's I feel one of my greatest honors. And then in this time when I've been on all these roles, I also served on the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board. There was a period of time where they decided that the licensing through the Department of Education and the Minnesota Board of Teaching, they were going to change all that. So it's very historical to have a licensure system change. And I was identified and appointed to the first professional education licensing standard board by Governor Dayton at the time. So I would say that's a wonderful accomplishment that plays back into what I get to do every day.
Thanks, Hetty. Welcome.
Thank you.
Our next question, describe your leadership style, how you gather input, make decisions, resolve conflicts, and essentially to move the organization or the district forward, and maybe if you could provide an example or two.
I really see myself as a collaborative, a leader. I feel like it's very important to walk alongside. I sometimes describe my leadership style too as gather the information, get people what they need, and get out of their way. So very much a capacity builder. And that's the thing I value in my leadership role. I try to learn as much as I can. That's been the value of being in the system, and I learned that through investing the time and energy and relationships needed. I think that leads to better outcomes and things that are happening within our system. I would say one of the best examples and most recent examples, even though I don't want to say the word out loud, is COVID. And having to step up to the plate and be a COVID coordinator and really manage all the information and opinions and directions coming at you and trying to develop clear and articulate communications, but then really trying to learn from our staff in every facet and capacity. What are their needs? What do they see happening? What are the implications? And really gathering that and again present to a school board that makes the ultimate decision.
Good evening, Dr. Hahn.
Good evening.
I think it'll be dark when you leave, so if you need directions, Ms. Director Hagelin can provide them for you. How do you work with staff, community members, other public institutions, and the private sector to enhance trust between all parties? And if you could give us an example of an initiative that's worked in building trust and partnership.
I really think trust is built through relationships and getting to have that conversation or understanding with the individual and being, again, like I've said, very invested in the outcomes that are going to happen. And so, I think that's the asset I've had. I've had years to develop that capacity in those relationships. One of the recent examples or things that I look at is, let's say, I sit on our child protection team. And so, on average, we have over 200 students in the school system that are in foster care. And there's lots of needs that come with that and lots of supports that need to come with that. So trying to have a better understanding and learn from resources we have in our community, who can we get them connected with, implications that might be happening then within their school setting, resources that they need, teachers that they're working with, I think would be a good example of that.
Excellent, thanks.
Heidi, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Could you describe your financial expertise and background and maybe give us some examples of your success in this area?
Well, I can tell you when it comes to financial structures, I would say special education finance is probably one of the most difficult financial systems to navigate. There's multiple formulas that go into place, and I feel like they're ever changing. And that interplays, when you look at our large system, that's just one financial piece. I also feel that there's training that we can take through our professional organizations and really being in tune or aware of things that are happening so you can understand those. Right now, I feel like the system has been blown up when you look at all these stimulus dollars or COVID dollars or CARES money. So there's a lot of time and energy that's spent. Yes, we have a business manager, but in order to support them, reading the grant applications, what do they mean? How can we leverage those grant applications? What are the impacts when we do? And so it's really looking at more of that long range, long term. But when you get into the state financial systems and all those reports, when you're looking at anything from SERVs and UFARs and EDRS, there's all those acronyms, you really count on a team to look at those things. But I think expertise is really coming from the reading, the learning, going into the state system and being able to see where you're at. And then also the great part about having relationships or being in a region, so we're also a regional center, is being able to have some of those discussions with other people who are looking at the same financial reports that you are and creating those implications. So I would not by any means say I'm an expert. I will never be an expert in finance because it's ever changing. But I think there's lots of resources and supports that continue to help us and help me personally grow in that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Heidi, what are the key components of a successful curriculum and instruction program in a district? And how do you get all grade levels and schools involved so the curriculum is aligned?
It's a lot of work, I can tell you that much. So really what it is we have state standards in every content area. And so we spend a lot of time, and our certified staff spend a lot of time looking at what are those standards, what are the key areas of those standards, and I would say probably one of the biggest challenges we have is the vertical alignment of those standards. So really looking at when a student is entering already in preschool, how does that then connect to kindergarten to first, and really making sure we vertically align. It's even more challenging when you start to add more buildings and sites into that dynamic as well. So we have 6 elementary schools, and we have wonderful teachers in all those schools, so it really goes back to that basic part of the standards. And then collectively, we really spend a lot of time focusing on, and we want to spend time focusing on, we might have 6 English teachers at the high school teaching the same standards, right? But they all have their different interpretations, so how are we assessing those? So when I really look at curriculum and assessment, it's understanding those as standards, prioritizing the standards, making sure we're assessing both summatively, informatively, and vertically aligning. And there's always a challenge with that. And then for fun, every once in a while they adjust and modify a standard, which then creates that whole curriculum cycle and process to start all over again, which is where we really, I believe, Brainerd Public Schools has very strong systems in place for that and processes for that work very well for us.
Great, thank you.
Next question. How do you define excellence in your administrative team? What expectations do you have of them? How do you mentor them? And how do you evaluate them?
That's a really good question, and I like that question a lot. I might have to ask you to repeat because there's multiple facets to that question, Charles. We have a very strong administrative team, and I think what makes them strong is they are deeply caring and invested in the success and outcome for each and every student that walks into their building. And I think they spend above and beyond hours making sure that happens, and they don't ask anything of their staff that they themselves do, and they model that each and every day. So in that sense, they're exceptional in that way. So how would then, I believe the next part is how do we support them? I think really it's taking time to listen to their needs and what's happening and mentoring them. We have a great chance and opportunity where we come together regularly as an administrative team. We also we demand that our teachers go through a continuous improvement process. We as administrators are modeling and doing that same process. When it comes to supervision and evaluation, that's one of the first challenges I had as the assistant superintendent is to develop an evaluation rubric and model. And I did that through research and looking at what existed, but through a lot of conversation with our leadership team. What were they needing? How could we have better opportunity to have those discussions? And then how do they set those measures? And so we've developed that system, I would say, collectively and together so we can meet that requirement of evaluation. I want you to repeat the question again though for me, Director.
Absolutely.
Blacklands.
How do you define excellence in your administrative team? What expectations do you have of them? How do you mentor them? And how do you evaluate them?
I'm really proud of our administrators. And again, I have that unique lens because I'm here. And I think one of the measures I have for them is what I hear others saying about them. And so when you get stopped in the community and they have something to say about the help that the administrator gave them or a direction that was given or how they were listened to or how they were respected, I think that's a huge reflection. And I think that is a high expectation that we have. We expect them to be role models. We expect them to go above and beyond. We expect them to be genuine with their intent and responsive to the needs that are faced with them.
Thank you. What are the significant challenges that schools need to consider as they plan for the future? And what unique challenges do you see here in Brainerd that might be different from other districts?
We're an ever-changing society, and I think what continues to amaze us is just the enormous access that our students have to information, to media, to all those things. And that's going to be a constant challenge. And I think we're preparing students for jobs that we don't even know will exist. And we're going to have to create students that are nimble and flexible and critical thinkers to be able to respond to that ever-changing need that's going to be happening before them. I feel thanks to our community, we're at a great advantage right now to respond to that. When I look at some of our expansions that we've done in career and technical education and responding to a job need or job forces that are going to exist within our surrounding community, we're positioned very well to do that. At the same time, there's, again, great demand of, I feel like the rigor continues to increase for our students and the demand continues to increase. And to be able to respond, the other challenge that we're facing is the workforce to do that. I mean, everybody's looking for workers, but right now in the state of Minnesota, 54% of teachers who hold teacher licenses aren't teaching. And so we need to recruit, retain high quality staff, and we need to be able to respond to those ever-changing rigorous demands for our students.
How do you describe a project or experience that would demonstrate your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, I am currently a member of the Brainerd Equity Advisory Committee, and I think we've been navigating and learning together as we've worked through that, and that's been a challenge because we have lots of opinions and needs that exist, and I think we're working very hard, and we need to be a system that works very hard to be transparent in our work, and I think our group has done a nice job of being able to lay out that process, and really our goal too is to engage the community. We had our first community engagement session, and that was very important to hear the needs. One of the areas we're focusing on right now really is the student experience. And that's why we're here. We're here for students and their success and their futures. And so learning what their needs are and what they're identifying as challenges, I think is something that we're actively involved in. And a perfect example of that here, we've been spending a year and a half to try to identify areas of focus. We know in Brainerd Public Schools, we have large pockets of students living in poverty. We have a high special education population, almost 1 in 4 students receiving special education services. We're growing in our diversity. We have multiple languages now being spoken in our district, which is fascinating when you can drive an hour south and there's over 100 languages being spoken, and we're just starting to experience some of those things here. But through all of this work and reading and time together, I bring up the example, foster children. There's another population that has a very unique set of needs, and in all of our work looking at an equity lens and how to remove barriers and how to create supports, here's this whole group of very dedicated people looking at that. Here's another group of students that they've identified. So I don't know to say that we're finding success, but I know we're very driven, and I do think the measures that we're taking are being successful. I do know with the work we're going to do, we are going to be removing barriers for students. And the ultimate goal in that equity work is that no child should ever feel less than. No staff member should ever feel less than when they walk through our doors, and that is our commitment through that work.
Oh, goodness me. If offered the position of superintendent, what are the 3 main things that you would do when you assume the role?
Well, we have spent a great amount of time and energy, thanks to the gift of our community, focused on construction. And there's been a lot happening, and it is very exciting to see the changes that are happening and the transformations that have occurred and having more state-of-the-art facilities. But in that time, we've also not had necessarily direction or energy, and I'll put the pandemic on top of that for the last 3 school years, the time to sit back and create a very strong strategic plan. And a strategic plan that takes into the input, and I think the information that's been gathered through the superintendent search, when you look at the community focus groups and the surveys, that's a great starting point. But I think a key thing would really be spending time to look at what are our next priorities. And how do we create a strategic plan around that? So that would be a priority number 1. And I think there's lots of input that needs to happen for that. The second would be, we've been a district of declining enrollment. And so one of the things that we have not done very well at this district is share our stories and let our community know all the things that we have happening in Brainerd Public Schools. We have forest and planetariums and career and technical education opportunities. And we've been so busy doing the work that I don't necessarily feel like we've shared our story and done the work that we need to do to get that message out there. So that would be a priority. And I think long-term financial planning and stability, when we're looking at coming off the back of a pandemic. And when we're looking at dollars that have come in and changes that have happened, I'll give you one example, is for the last 2 years, breakfast and lunch have been free. It's been wonderful. No family has ever had to worry about that. However, one of the things we as a school system rely on is students and families filling out a free and reduced lunch application. That's how we get some measures in their funding. So when you look at compensatory ed and all these different financial funding streams, it's been a wonderful benefit for our families that they haven't had to worry. It's been phenomenal. However, when you look at systems that tie to that, we're now $650,000, $700,000 decreasing in our compensatory revenue because of that, because there's a system in place and forms that have to be filled out. That's a huge concern. So being able to respond to that, plus there's been these CARES dollars that have come in, there's multiple factors, and they're not surprises to us. So I think really starting to set out a financial plan and a long-term plan for that post-pandemic. And we know inflation, none of us could have predicted a war taking place and having a significant impact now on the cost of goods and energy and things like that. So that would be another really strong focus that I would have. And can I add a fourth? Is that permission to do so? I think really developing a communication plan and how that communication process would work, and working very closely with the school board of that communication plan and how we would roll that out. Again, one of the things I've read through the focus groups and through the surveys was this transparency piece. And again, being in the system, we almost feel like it's ironic because the fear that we've had on our end in the education system, whether it's been from food service or para or certified staff, we flipped education in a week and we gave everybody a device, and now the teachers were going into people's homes, really. And the angst that caused on our side of that education system was huge. And so when you talk about transparency, it was all right there. And I remember meeting with staff, what happens if somebody video records me? What happens if somebody puts it on Facebook? What happens if, and the irony is none of that happened. And if anything, it gave families a glimpse into what teachers do every day and what support staff do every day. And then the fun part has been, teachers got a glimpse into people's homes and the lives that are happening too. So there's a wonderful interplay that occurred and a greater understanding that occurred. But on top of that, we had to shut down facilities. We had to limit our visitors. And so I think that pattern of distrust are things that were occurring. And there's a perfect opportunity, I think, with a communication plan and some communication and strategies of how we would develop around that.
Share with us your experience with operating and/or a bond referendum, and what did you learn, and how successful were you at passing them?
Well, this is my first superintendent interview. So I've never had that opportunity as a superintendent. And again, I'm homegrown, so 26 years here. I have the nightmare of 2008 that we all lived through, and I feel unfortunate that referendum was ran as a gotcha. Like, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. If you don't do this, and it really never looked at giving communication of what would happen if you did, and how things could be enhanced, and how things could be made better, and how things could be made more stable. So I think I learned a lot in the bleachers. I'll put it, because I was an observer in that, of what not to do. And so I know it's needed. I mean, I've lived here and now have negotiated contracts and sat through budget meetings. We have cut our way out. We cut every single year. And people don't really necessarily realize that or feel that, because we do everything we can to preserve what's closest to our kids in classrooms and activities and programs. So we cut a lot of things on the outsides of that to preserve that. But we've gotten to a point where there's really nothing left to cut, and the thing we continue to cut are people, and those people are getting closer and closer and closer to the classroom and the impacts of our students. And so when I think about that, the interesting thing, what was fascinating in the focus group data that I got to read now that I'm a candidate, every single group, even the students, I remember discussing with our consultants, even the student group identified the need for an operating referendum. They're starting, which makes me think you're starting to see an impact or having some implications of that. And so when I think about how it's going to be, its timing stinks. I'm not gonna lie, when you're coming off the back of a pandemic, and now we're gonna look at inflation cost and what businesses have had to endure and what families have had to endure, the timing to do one is not ideal. But the one thing I do know about this community is this community continues to step up when it comes to children and families. And I think when you look at putting a plan, again, that's part of that communication strategy and process. That's part of the transparency. And really, I think to do it successfully, it's about having the right relationships and truly being committed to this community and the outcomes that happen for our students. And I wouldn't be sitting in this chair. I didn't grow up thinking I'd be a superintendent. But this is a community, and I think that's one of the things we need to do. And how do you do it? It's through relationships and communications and clearly identifying not what goes away, but what can be enhanced. But I have no success at running because I haven't attempted yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Heidi, can you tell us, what do you think standardized test scores tell us and not tell us about a school district? And how would you address the achievement gap among groups in our district?
Standardized tests are one measure, but they are a great dipstick measure. So really it's a measure of our system, and it's data that we can look at long-term. And we compare trends and grade levels and content areas. So it really is a measure of overall, but it doesn't drill down to what we need for each student and for each student's success. What's going to be very interesting about our standardized testing data is really, it's been blown up. So all that trend data and the things that we've been relying on and that dipstick within our systems, it's interrupted from the pandemic. You know, we didn't test, kids didn't have to show up to test. So it's, at this point, I feel like we're going to start that trajectory over. And so again, that's where systems and good systems are built upon having multiple measures. And what you look at for data is you look where your data converges. And so we have observation survey testing in our elementary. We have formative and summative assessments. We have STAR testing. So really when you're looking at an assessment framework and really measuring what our students are doing and how they're achieving, we look at multiple points of data. It's a valuable point of data, a standardized test, such as the MCAs, but that's an overall systems measure. And the real work goes with what's happening in each individual classroom for each student. And I really believe Brainerd has a wonderful assessment system to look at that. And they can have if I'm a parent coming in and I want to know where my child is at, we have staff that can respond to that.
How do you communicate with staff, students, and the public in your current position? What different strategies do you use? Share an example of how you use technology in your communication.
Well, I feel we're on 24/7 when it comes to communication. I strongly value direct communication, clear communication. I operate under, if you like Brene Brown, clear is kind. The more clear you can be, the kinder you are. I also communicate by trying to listen first and have full understanding. I really believe, so a lot of my role right now as an assistant superintendent is I get a lot of the phone calls nobody else wants. So I've had lots of angry phone calls and frustrated parents or hurt parents, and I really feel they're all for good reason. People have a concern and they need to be listened to and it needs to be addressed. I feel like the response in my communication needs to be timely. It's interesting, texting, the text, I figure I love watching, like, first your phone rings, you know, then your cell phone rings, or it's an email. They all come at once, and we have a responsibility to respond. Email, sometimes I feel like people read between the lines, but I also believe in timely communication, so that's an example of responding. But I really feel when it comes to a concern from a parent or directly about a student, I prefer to have that immediate conversation, and when possible, face-to-face and in person, so I can have a better understanding. And I approach every communication or every interaction with genuine intent. I assume that the person's going to be genuine with their intent and their communication with me, and I deserve to give them that respect back.
Wonderful. Obviously, you know a lot about the school district, so if selected, how would you use this knowledge, and what knowledge do you not know that you would need in establishing your entry plan?
I do know a lot about this district. And it's interesting. So when you look at people applying, I'm not applying for other positions. I mean, I love Brainerd and this is where I want to be. And I think the advantage that I have is that this is my home. This is the place that I live. This is the place that I love. And the reason I love it is, honestly, it's not the job description. It's my current job description. It's not that. It's about the people that work here. And it's about our families that live here. And it's about our students that come in our building. And it's about a community and the community response. And I think being in a superintendent position, you're in a lot different position than you are as the assistant, because really you do have that ability to take a broader net and connect with different organizations and different community members and businesses to really look at how do you leverage that to continue to advance what needs to happen in the public school system. And so I haven't really had that opportunity to do that work. I'm involved in my own service groups and I volunteer on different things and I do it because I love it. But that's kind of been a personal bucket filler. This would take that bucket filling to a whole new level. And I think one of the things that I have a lot to learn, there's always a lot to learn about your community, even though you've been here for 26 years. I think the advantage I have is with that knowledge, there's a lot that I can bring back that people don't know that's happening in the schools. To be able to share some of the stories and the excellent things that are happening, but then now have an ear to find out what's needed on the other side. I haven't been, I'm looking at Director Hagelin because I know business and we've talked career and technical advancement, but I haven't sat down with business owners to say, when you're looking at the graduates that are coming out of our high school, what are things that you need? So there's a lot of learning that I'd have to do on that side, but it's exciting to do that because I think I want to brag about what we're going to do. When you have a question, I can give you 100 examples of how it's happening here, but then learning from you, boy, tell us how we can do it better. So there's a lot of learning left.
Great, thank you, Heidi. We're down to the last question.
Okay.
So, like you, we've got a number of great candidates. We're blessed as a district to have that. Explain to us, share with us why this board should hire you to be our next superintendent and why you want to, and I'm going to add the word continue to work in the Brainerd Public Schools.
That's, again, a great question, but it's the expected question, right? Like this is the standard one. I'm not looking for a different job. There's a lot of work that has to be done here, and it's going to be a lot of hard work, and I'm not afraid of that work. There's times where sometimes you might want to run the other way. I don't want to run the other way. I'm going to run right in it and right at it. And I do it because, and why I want to do it and why you should hire me is because I care deeply about what happens for each and every student. And I have so much pride in the people who've committed their life to work on behalf of our students. And I don't care in what capacity that is. Because people who work for school systems right now are really highly sought after because we're reliable, we're dependable, we know it's not an 8-hour job, and from bus driver to clerical, and I get to see it on the front line every single day. I had a parent stop me, so my nerves have been super high today, which is just weird because this is what I do, this is where I'm at. But I had a parent stop me on the sidewalk when I was leaving to go home and change, and never met her, but she thanked me. Thank you for the work that you've done. And we chose to come here because of what you were doing. And now look what's happening for my daughter. And this is my little son, and he's coming in here and he's getting extra service. That's amazing, right? Went and got a haircut because you should look good for your interview. Right? Take time and get a haircut. And I had another parent stop and say, and I recognized her and I said, somehow I recognize you. How do I know you? And she had actually come in and volunteered into one of our classrooms. But then she tells me the story about, so she has twins. And so she put her twins in 2 different classes. But her one twin, school's been hard. She told me the teacher every Sunday night has a Google Meet. So, right, we're not distance learning. We don't have to do Google Meets anymore, thank goodness. I'm screened out, most of our staff are. But every Sunday night, that kindergarten teacher holds a Google Meet with a student, makes the student read her a book, and then talks about how our week's gonna go. Teacher doesn't have to do that. Taking the extra time, willing to do it. I sit on our foundation, and for the last 2 years, I'm probably some of the worst financial dire straits for businesses and families. More money has gone to our foundation to help support scholarships. There's gonna be $140,000 worth of scholarships given away to our seniors, thanks to our community. Child protection team, again, worst 2 years, most money that's been given to the child protection team to make sure we're making a difference for kids. Brainerd is unique. Brainerd is unique. There are so many amazing things we do, but we don't really talk about it because we're too busy working. And so why do I want to be your superintendent? I want to tell that story. I want to support the staff who show up every single day, who make a difference. So much so that a parent feels compelled. Never met her. Obviously, she recognized me. Then I realized I had talked to her on the phone, or spoken to her on the phone. That's the only reason I'm sitting in front of this board right now, is that's my dedication to this district. That's my love for this district. I don't want to go anywhere else. And I may not be your most qualified candidate, but I guarantee you I'm going to be the one that's the most committed, the one who's going to work hard and do what needs to be done. So that's why I think you should hire me. And if you don't, I'm going to keep working, so. It's a win-win. I got a job, so.
Well, thank you. We have a little bit of time left, so do you have some questions for the board?
I do have questions for you. And more so it's, I think, so I have a better understanding, but I'm just curious. What has been the last student event that you've attended? And what did you see? What did you learn? And why was it a bucket filler for you? Not the question you expected.
No. Yeah. No. I'm trying to think of what.
Two of you have daughters that are active in high school, should get in here quick.
No, yeah, I was trying to think, because we're
And
between
Mr. Black
seasons
Lancer.
right now,
I know.
of course. So we haven't quite,
Basketball
haven't quite had the
games.
chance to go to any spring sports or activities yet. But yeah, I do have a daughter who's a senior, so I got to see our dance team just perform completely excellently at the Target Center. And to see you know, we're a big school in a small town, but we really feel like we can sometimes feel like a little fish in a big pond when we go and compete against metro schools. And we showed up and we competed and we were strong, and our girls are great and our kids are great. And then it's not an activity, but I see right now, my son's on the golf team. And so while we haven't seen a meet yet, I see.
You might not see that till June.
I know, but I see Coach Wallace like, still, guys, we're practicing, we're getting in a gym, you know, we're getting together and we're learning about scoring. So when you talk about that dedication and, you know, it'd be easy for them to say, oh, well, sorry, it's too wet to practice, but they're figuring it out. So dedication.
Dedication.
Yep.
I was at the last one that I can remember was I was at the section finals game where Brainerd Warriors lost to Moorhead, and we had been to the semifinals before that as well. It was pretty exciting, but both those situations were significant to me, but also to our family. Is one of the drawbacks to Brainerd I've found is we're so big, school district wise, and sometimes it's tricky for the kids to plug into that. We're all part of the same school here, but to be a part of that process and to sit in a gymnasium out of town with everybody wearing blue, next to about 10 people all within a 5-foot square radius of us, which is a little uncomfortable coming out of COVID, but to cheer and yell and to experience victory, but then also to experience loss and to be with those students on both ends of that spectrum, and to allow my kids to be a part of that, really allowed them to feel and be part of that larger community, which is the Brainerd School District. So it was a lot of fun, and as a school board member, I felt that was really important and fun for me to see as well. And as a once 10-year-old boy, it was amazing to be part of that. So I loved it.
Okay, I'll go next, and I'm feeling very convicted by this question because I've gone to a lot of events in my career, my 17 years of school board, but since COVID and everything, I've kind of gotten out of the practice. I had my kinship partner who was in choir and all that kind of stuff. So what I remember last doing was going to Lowell, and this was an open house, I think, so it must have been in the fall. But the kids were there. No, anyway, and I was called a grandma, which I'm not a grandma, but that's okay. I was called a grandma. But what I liked is we had just been talking, it had been in the news about no one teaching about the Constitution, you know? And there on the board, I think it was Mr. Meyer's area in the new Lowell, there was all this stuff about the Constitution and the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm just like, and they say we don't meet about the Constitution. So it was very fun. It was actually fun to be called a grandma too. But
It's a term.
anyway, but I am going to
terms of
get
endearment.
back into more of those concerts because I love the choir concerts. So, and I have been to the Gitche Zubia a few times, but I can't remember what for exactly. So.
We have an awesome concert coming up next week that we will be out to dinner with candidates during.
Showcase.
Yeah, I know.
The music
Everyone to
showcase is
go
coming.
who watches
I would've been
this,
at that.
Go see that concert.
It's fun to
excited
finally,
about that.
it's very fun to be back. We're finally going to have the big activities banquet too, so.
Yeah.
So I think my last event was within the last couple of months. I went to the at Forest View when the robotics team and kids showcased what they were doing, and it was really cool. I think there were 3 or 4 different teams, and they were demonstrating how what they did, what they put together, and then we could go to kind of a breakout session into one of the classrooms, and that team stood in front of whoever was there and shared their experiences, and we can ask questions. So it was really, really cool, especially for someone, my interest in that career technical side and how that relates to, the investment we've made in the high school. So it was a lot of fun, and these kids were, it was amazing to see what they could do. So it was a ton of fun, yeah.
Thank you. I remembered another thing I did this winter, judging the class over at the high school. You were there.
Yeah, you scratched my anchor. You took my answer.
I
was going to say, what I was going to say is if Director Nelson was convicted by the question, I'm on death row. That was the last event that I went to that was student-led in that sense, in that we both, Director Nelson and I were there when the business class students were doing their presentations of their little company launches, and there were representatives from different businesses in the community, and Bladek was there giving out money like Halloween candy. It was kind of cool. They were giving these kids money to pursue these little things. It was like Shark Tank. It was like minnow sharks. It was kind of cool. Yeah. So that was really cool. But I want to add another thing that wasn't really student-led, but you want to talk about bucket fillers, was probably 4 weeks ago, was parent-teacher conferences at the high school. And I was able to get there, and I got there ahead of my wife, so we arrived at different times. And I think those are the events that are always, because you have a chance to kind of stand back. And what really filled my bucket that night was watching teachers who have been working all day, knowing they've got to sit there and deal with an onslaught of parents with Lord knows whatever they're going to say, especially when I walk up. And to watch, again, not just their dedication to the parents that have kids in their classes now, but when they recognize the kid that they had a year ago or 2 years ago. And as many of you know, I have a very unique child that teachers tend to remember a lot of times, and it was really fun for them to all come walking up and ask how Nick was doing and how's this going and how's that going. And again, I think to your earlier point, to see the stellar dedication and commitment to their craft that those people exhibit every day. I mean, the kids are part of that too, because you see the relationship, but I don't know what else fills a bucket when you can see these people performing at the top of their profession.
I agree.
I would join in with Charles to say the end of the basketball season, we got to a few games, and it was fun to watch them round out their season. But I would also be remiss if I didn't mention, because I've got a band student, and I go to bed listening to Blue Shades, and I wake up listening to Blue Shades, and these kids are so proud. So I know the band director probably challenged them immensely with that song. He had great expectations, but they lived up to it.
So, and I really appreciate being able to have that insight because I get to see you in lots of places. But it's interesting when you think about a school board, there's different reasons that people run for school board. And really, it's reflective. We're all here for kids. And I truly think, too, that it's a calling to be in education. Again, every facet, every single person that walks through our doors is an educator with our students. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Do I get to have another one? I'm still okay on time. Nice big timer, by the way. So it helps when I didn't wear my glasses.
There's a theory that it's for me for future school board
Oh,
meetings.
excellent, excellent. That's why it's facing you directly.
Yeah, exactly.
That was really good. So we've talked about, and we know there's financial challenges ahead for our district, every district in the state of Minnesota, just because of how our funding streams work. So as a board, where do you see those priorities falling, or how do you see the direction needed in order to create that stability and yet enhancement for our students?
I look at what's happening down in the legislators right now, the big debate on additional funding. And I've said this before, we're blessed with $100 million, whatever that number is. I'm all about, well, not all, one of my big things is continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. We have to work smarter, we've got to do more with less. If we've got $100 million, we've got to be at the top of our game. Mm-hmm. To provide that stability and to provide the growth and take us from where we are to where we want to go. And I think we can do that. I really can. And it takes commitment, it takes strong leadership, it takes strong, you mentioned strategic planning. We have to have that. If we don't know where we're going, we're never going to get there. Mm-hmm. And I believe that we can provide that stability, but we can't be reactive. We've got to be thinking in advance. So we've got to challenge ourselves to do better, work smarter.
And I think we really need, as you said, share our story, get some of our kids back that we're missing, grow our. I mean, we have the facilities to hold a lot of kids, so let's get them back here. And we may have to look at an operating referendum in the next few years, and that's something the next superintendent and the board is going to have to wrestle with. But and efficiencies, always efficiencies. I've heard that from many of you. So, yeah.
Well, as a relatively new board member, I got my first front row seats to a detailed budget discussion last week. So I think I'm beginning to develop a burgeoning awareness of some of the challenges that we're facing. And while I agree with both Director Nelson and Director Hagelin, I think those are two sides of the same coin. I think they solve the problem simultaneously. Smarter, not harder, where you can, more efficient where you can, but partner, right? Get the community in there so that if we have to go to that step to go to a referendum or an operating levy or whatever that is, that we have some intrinsic support. And I think you covered that really well when you compared 2008, and some of those things. What I would add, though, to that is that sort of building on my experience in the private sector, addition by subtraction is not a great way to grow a business. Sometimes it's a fiscal reality. So it's that wrestling match. So how do we win that? And I think we win that through, really finding ways to leverage things that are outside the district resource pool that can augment what we're doing here. And I think it all dovetails. I mean, unfortunately, every issue that we've talked about in year 4, when you answered 4 instead of 3, those are all interconnected and all serve that same purpose, in my opinion. And I think that's the secret sauce to, creating those successful outcomes from a financial perspective that then trickle down into everything else. I feel like I want a job now.
And I do have to say also that I think we are a pretty efficient district when you think that the average operating referendum out there is $800, something right around there, and we have 0. So we're already working efficiently.
I'd agree. There's like, I believe that statistic's almost 90%, and we're not in that 90%. So we've been very, I think, efficient, effective. The point being is there's so many curveballs that continue to come. You know, they change this, then it impacts this, and those are not necessarily things you can foresee. But I do think having that plan to lay it out. Can I finish with one more thing?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so I have had the great privilege, and I believe that I've had great mentorship. When I look at, I've always had a team. And I think that's the biggest thing, is having a team. So when you ask about our admin team, I have just great, deep respect, but I also have great, deep respect for every single individual in the system, and here's why. I think my biggest eye-opening position that I've ever held within Brainerd Public Schools was when I was the Assistant Director of Special Ed for Brainerd. So I got to drive around everywhere all day long, from this building to this building to this building, and could see different things. I've had the fortunate gift of living in this community, and we have a child find model. So I don't know if you know this or not, but in special ed, you're required to have a phone number and a fax number and an email that's open and on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And then there's a timeline that starts. So when somebody makes a referral to that, the district has to respond. So we have received calls before a child's even born, because parents are now going to know that their child has been identified or is going to have some type of disability. So our job is to find that resources. This is what schools do. I don't think people realize that, and that this is the fascination and the part that I had in that position. So take a phone call before a child's even born. So school staff start to automatically work with a family before even one of our little warriors has arrived. And I have been so fortunate, because I've been able to hold a baby and get to know that family and work with the family and watch the staff come in and support that child. And I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories is a little guy who I got to meet when he was little, but I got to watch him on his first day come to school. So we have a 3 to 5 year old center-based program, so it's his first day coming to school. I was fascinated with him because it was the right timing. I was walking back from the high school, the bus pulls up, and here's this little guy, blonde hair, glasses, his backpack was bigger than he was. They're helping him off the bus. He's pulling his walk-behind walker behind him and struggling just to get in the door. But he's smiling the entire time, so you can't take your eyes off of him. He finally gets up and the door's open, and it's Teacher June. Like, he just knew his teacher, thrilled. So this is a young man who struggled even to walk. And I remember getting called down the first day to watch him take his first few steps and to be able to tell mom about his first few steps. By the end of that year, he was walking up 3 flights of stairs, because our office was on the 3rd floor. That was his job. He'd bring some mints to everybody every once in a while so he could get his physical therapy in. He's not going to go to middle school. Right? I had a video of this kid when he finally learned how to climb up a slide and go down. So I'm not just talking the reading and the math and all the things we get to do academic, but the work that it's taken for him and that partnership that's occurred with his family. And then it hit me, right? So getting this, and I think about, it's one of my favorite things too, is when we see the sea of blue come down the hill, or we see it at a racetrack during COVID. I mean, that was pretty fun too, watching seniors get to peel out and celebrate, but watching that sea of blue. And then I think about the hundreds of people. So in education, it takes hundreds of people to get one child through the door and get them to their graduation day. Hundreds. The secretary who knows everything about them, the bus driver who says good morning, good night, the custodian who gives special jobs, hundreds. Just for one. And we do it every single day. And people that know me, anybody who knows me, and you can talk because I do adjunct faculty work and things like that, I brag about Brainerd all the time, and people will tell you it's different here. And it's different here because of how much people care. Our community, our staff care. And so I get chills every time I think about that. Hundreds of people. And so I feel like every day that I get to come to work and be with our staff and our administration and our kids is a gift. So, and the work you direct is making that impact for those kids.
Thank you. Thank you. Very inspirational story.
It's a fun story.
Good story.
Can't wait to, he's going to rock the middle school. He's going to let you know. It's a good thing middle school teachers are going to be busy.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Heidi.
can take a quick break before we start.
Yep.
Well, first of all three of us have been talking about the fact that we're, so impressed with the way you have handled these interviews. We hear from the candidates too, they felt comfortable, they felt, welcomed, and you've done, a great job, and that's to your credit, and understand.
We had the easy part.
Yeah. So now, you've got a fair amount of information about these 6 candidates, with all their credentials and so on, along with the answers to your questions. And it's important to keep in mind that you're not hiring a superintendent tonight. All you're doing is bringing back 3 people that you feel, would have the best potential to really be a good fit and really connect here and meet the needs you have at this point in time. So next week's he's gonna bring a lot more information, a lot more people involved, lots of opinions, and now it's just a matter of narrowing it down to half this field. And Ruth and Tom probably remember our little system we use, and we've done this for, this is my 14th year. Hard to believe when I say that, of doing this, and it's always works extremely well, and it really facilitates being able to get to where you have to get tonight in a manner that you don't really have to talk that much about some of the candidates. Typically, a couple will kind of fall out and a couple kind of fall in, and we go from there. But it's just a real kind of nice way to do it, we think. So Patty has put together some little slips of paper here that say 1 through 6. And so what we'd like you to do is just your personal individual opinion right now. And you don't need to put your name on it or anything. It's just a kind of a straw poll kind of thing. Nothing binding, and just to write down in order of 1 through 6, rank these 6 candidates, starting with the one you think would be your top choice at this point, on down through your 6th choice. And then we'll go from there.
Do you want them by name?